And it looks like I did not unmute myself. So while Carl was unmuted, I misclicked the button. So just want to do a quick shout out to everyone in the chat. Thanks for joining us tonight. Whether you're here or now watching it live or watching it back in the future, we super appreciate it. And now that you can hear us, I hope the levels are all right with the background music. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at right now. We're going to be talking obviously about Grand Clash tonight, so this is going to be Carl's recap of his event and all that. And I think now that we have audio working and all's good, we can just jump right into it. As quick intro, Grand Clash, 120 players or just under. GT in Canada, Quebec, near Trois-Rivières, in Shawinigan. It was an awesome event, one of my favorites every year. The four of us from our team have gone 2 years in a row now. Greatest GT in Canada, absolutely love it.
Yep.
That's the intro. Carl, why don't you take it away? And I just start off by telling us about your list and what you were thinking there.
Sure. So this is a list that I've been testing for the last few weeks, and there was some changes that I wanted to make to it. But unfortunately, with time constraints of having to have the army painted, which is kind of a running theme, I guess, now for myself, where I paint a whole new army in 2 weeks to try to get to a GT. I promise, like I said in my video in the beginning of the year where I made the commitment to one army, I think I'm going to stick with this for a little bit because there are so many different builds that you can kind of unlock and play with in this specific book. And I did take the Maggotkin of NURGLE. Kind of the core of the list is 9 Pusgoyle Blightlords, which are very, very popular nowadays. And a Lord of Affliction, which has the overpowering stench. So for those of you that don't know, if you're within 7 of that gentleman, you can't issue command abilities, and if you're wholly within 7, you cannot receive or issue command abilities. I took a Great Unclean one with the Witherstave and Fleshy Abundance, and paired with that was the Plague Bearers. So this was all wrapped up in a battle regiment, so 1 drop, 1995. Kind of the thinking is to outlast your opponent, play a very measured game. I know some of you who have watched Season of War have watched Mitch pilot a semi-similar list with 16 Pusgoyle instead of my 10. I play it much more conservatively than he does. I usually don't even pin my opponent turn 1. I literally just, fly around, no pun intended, and cap objectives, and then, try to grind out my opponent that way. I do have the advantage of having 20 Plague Bearers and the Great Unclean One who come as a second wave and, pin my opponent as well. So it's a very interesting list. Maggotkin doesn't seem to be the strongest army just on the surface level of things, but when you start to stack different rules together, one by one, then it starts to all come together, and on the table it's very, very powerful, which is why we see Maggotkin have so much success. I wanted to give a shout out to another Maggotkin of NURGLE player from Ontario, Lionel, from Max Planet Games, who did go 4-1 as well, but he took 12 Beasts of NURGLE and Belcourt. That was a super fun, cool, interesting list. So there are different ways you can build the list. I went for more, I guess now you could call it a traditional Pusgoyle Blightlords plus Plague Bears plus the Great Unclean One. I'll kind of go through my games, and at the very end I'll say what the thing that I disliked about my list and what I would change in the future, seeing how I have a few big GTs coming up in the end of May. So that's kind of my
from my perspective in talking about your list compared to some of the other ones. It's a much more balanced NURGLE list, in my opinion. We've obviously see in a variety of NURGLE lists that there's a lot of strong units that can be spammed, and often are spammed by different people in different lists. You know, Mitch with the Pustoils, I know he's going to be looking at some other builds, and he's playing a variety of NURGLE stuff too, but has been played that list quite a bit. Lionel, like you said, with the Beast of NURGLE, yeah, it's like there's so many strong units in that book that could be spammed and be a solid army. But it also gives you the, like, in a balanced build, which is always the way I like to go too. There's, great tactical choices, with a range of different abilities and strengths.
The interesting thing is we saw quite a few Glotkin lists as well at Grand Clash, which were very interesting because the 5th round opponent that I had was a Glotkin list, and so yeah. So I'll kind of take us through my games. I did end up 4-1. Sadly, I was the one loss in our 20 games that we had as a team. So I was the sole person who lost. I will, as a caveat, say I had a few days bender before the tournament, and round 1 was not particularly well played by myself.
I think you can be forgiven for your loss, Carl. I think anytime any of us go 4-1, we're ecstatic with it. That's always the goal. The difference from 4-1 to 5-0 is matchups, and
that's right.
lock it for the most part, right? So nobody faults you at all for that. I will pull up the lists while you're talking about them back and forth. I just have the BCP pages up, so not pretty, but it'll do.
Our beautiful faces.
So, we'll go back and forth.
We'll go back and forth. So my round 1, feeling confident. Prior to Grand Clash, I was undefeated with a list. I was 9 wins and 1 draw, and my only draw was, of course, Jordan here. So I was feeling very, very good. I was undefeated, even in testing where I was, trying certain things that I wouldn't do in a tournament setting. I was still finding some great success. The only person that I have a losing record to is Oliver with his Daughters of Cain. So, I was trying some weird stuff with him. So I was feeling very confident, and I looked at the pack and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can 5-0 finally and win best general. And then it all came crashing down in round 1. So round 1, I played a gentleman. I'm gonna butcher names. They are all French names. I did not speak French in high school. Frederic Pruyol, I believe is his name. He played a Iron Jaws list, but one that wasn't typical. What you see nowadays is usually 2 Maw Crushers or 1 Maw Crusher, Pigs, and Bloodtooths. He ran Iron Suns, Mega Boss and Maw Crusher, of course. The War Chanter is the Mega Boss. He did have 1 unit of Pigs, but the interesting part of his list was 2 units of 10 Brutes. Now, having played Iron Jaws myself, I knew that Brutes did an incredible amount of damage, just when they can get in. That 4-inch move, even with the Mighty Destroyers, means that they don't get to their opponent quite in time to do the damage and push through. And then he had 2 5s of Ard Boys as well, and he was a 9 drop, I believe, and so I had choice. Now, the mission that we were playing round 1 was Tectonic Interference. So it was a mission that had 3 objectives in the center, relatively close to each other. I believe they're something like 3 or 4 inches like in between each other because of 6 inches diameter. So they were very, very central, as well as having only 9 inches from the center as your deployment zone, so you're 18 inches apart from your opponent. So quite close to each other, a knife fight. And I looked at that list and I was like, I am already having a bad matchup.
There will often be a DPS check, or Iron Jaws have the DPS, especially when it's Brute heavy opposed to Pig heavy. And in that matchup, they do not need the speed of Pigs. It is far more beneficial for them to have the fightiness of Brutes.
So kind of my game plan, and now kind of running it back in my head and looking at it, kind of dissecting the game after I played it. I went for a conservative approach. I gave him first. I deployed fairly far back, and smartly enough, Frederick just touched the all 3 points, and then tectonic interference. There is no 1-2 more. It's 2 for the primary, 1 for each. And so he scored the 4 points there, then did ferocious advance, which was quite easy, and he basically passed turn to me and told me, "What are you gonna do now?" In my mind, the reason why I had given him first was I was scared of that Iron Jaw's output, and I did not want him to double turn me. I believe if he double turned me, it would probably have been over. So I played conservative as well, because of the pregame move not being impactful in this game, because I was wanting to give him first turn. I was quite far from him, so I decided to, again, take all the objectives away from him, but be conservative. But that did mean that we only had 12 inches of in between each other, because he was touching the objectives on one end, I was touching objectives on the other end, and I was thinking if I had win the double, that I would then commit in and try to smash him with the immortal wounds from my charging, and that sort of thing. And the central point was, held by my 20 plague bears and the great unclean one right behind it. And then I do this quite often against melee armies, where I front the plague bears. I let my opponent charge me. I summon a Sloppity Bile Piper, and I say no pile in. He eliminates the front line. And because you can't pile in, if you don't have 3-inch reach weapons, most of the time you're going to get stuck against the plague bears, because I remove the front line first, so that I'm outside of your melee range, and then I hold you there for basically the whole game, forcing you to retreat. If you do retreat, I charge you with one model, and then I string them out. You kill that one model, and you're in the same position again, where you're stuck against a plague bear or swarm. So that was kind of my game plan for the plague bears in the central point, and my flies would come on either end, smash whatever is there, and then collapse into the back of what he put in the middle. He put the Maw Crusher and 10 brutes in the middle. So that was my plan if I had win turn. If I didn't win turn, I was still kind of confident that because I was within the 12, that he would only move 4, and then he would need 7-inch charges, which is average to get into me, and I would swamp him with the plague bears. And so yeah, he ended up winning turn and called the Wa, and just crunched into me. The 6 pigs on one end, the 10 brutes in the front. Now, my previous turn, I did have enough summoning points to summon Sloppy Bile Piper, but I forgot. So, no Sloppity. So he was able to pile in and then eliminate all my plague bears. Pretty easy. And then his 10 brutes got into 2 unit of flies, picked them up. His 6 pigs got into 2 flies, picked them up. And now this was the big thing. I had, I was like, okay, 4 flies is bad. 20 plague bears is bad. Now the great unclean one staring right at the 10 brutes. He might do some work. And then the rest of the 4 flies, which I kept kind of in reserve backwards, can eliminate 10 brutes pretty easily with immortal wounds and that sort of thing. So on my turn, I did that, eliminated 10 brutes. And I was like, okay, it's looking bad, but when turn 3 happens, then I can potentially, if I win the turn, do the same as what he did to me. So I won the turn, and I was like, okay, there's a game now. Great and clean one into the brutes, flies into the into the other brute unit, and do that sort of thing. Now, this was my biggest mistake. I did not check his list prior to playing him. I'm so used to playing Iron Jaws in Bloodtooths, that I had forgotten that he was Iron Suns. And so I was very conservative with how I charge. I tagged the corners of units, and I was like, I'm gonna lock down his output and then eliminate those things. Then he has to come into me. Iron Suns, for those of you who don't know, is a CP allows you to charge. If you issue it from the
In the enemy
Mega Boss
turn.
Maw Crusher in the enemy turn, correct, on my turn. If you issue it in the with the Maw Crusher, you can do it with 3 units. And so he's like, I'm gonna charge you. I'm like, no, your Iron Suns aren't you. And he proceeded to charge me, and he eliminated basically my whole entire army except for the Great and Clean one. Now, the Great and Clean one in this game was massive. He literally sat around, eliminated things left, right, and center. And by the end of the game, Frederic only had his 6 pigs and a unit of Ard Boys, which is a huge comeback from myself, killing the Maw Crusher, 10 brutes with just the Great and Clean one. But because of the differential and how this scenario was played, he played it well. Turn 3, when I had won the roll off, he decided to keep all the objectives so that he could score quite high. And so it was actually a very, very quick game. I was done within 35 minutes, and as Josh in the chat was saying, I felt a little down on myself. I've lost games with this list, but I'm not in any sort of capacity like this where I was just blown off the table. Now, it's a combination of 2 things. One, his list was perfectly designed for this.
It was
this game.
Perfect storm.
Correct.
Perfect storm for you.
And the other thing, now that I've looked at it again, was if I had just pushed my whole army into him turn 1, put the flies into the brutes, they would only be -2/1 damage, and the impact hits from all my flies means those are just mortals going through. Iron Jaws does not have any mortal wound protection at all, and I would be choosing the engagements in that end. I can, he screened each of the 10-man units with 5 Ard Boys. If I was just to charge the Ard Boys to remove them, then pile in so that the brutes are locked up, then it would be a different game. It would be a game where we're fighting off of the objectives. He has to get through the flies first, then get on the objectives, as opposed to him just scoring big turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and then me having to try to catch up with half an army.
Yeah.
So I played it. I'm usually, as Jordan, am a very, very aggressive player when I play. But because of NURGLE and my inexperience, I don't know when to forward that aggression, and I've been attempting quite recently to play a more measured game with NURGLE, where I cap objectives, retreat, rally, that sort of thing, redeploy, as opposed to just trying to smash my opponent straight off.
Playing storing the points.
Correct. But I think in this instance, that would have been the smartest idea, is to just get the disease up turn 1, get the impact hits turn 1, and then have him try to fight out of his deployment zone. And if I hold him up for 3 turns or so, then I could have possibly just ran away with the score, or kept it close enough where it wasn't a 20-0. So I did end up at my round 1 a big fat 0 points, which was basically took me out from winning the tournament. But there's still 4 games left to play.
Yeah, lots left. But yeah, again, it sounds like it was literally a perfect storm of, a mission and opponent. Because I feel like that mission in against some armies is an auto win for you potentially, or for NURGLE. But when you're facing a slow army that just wants to sit there and fight, and they're good at it, but that's not what you want. And and against that army on, say, taking hold or something that was more spread out.
Tooth and nail,
Feral
even
foray.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant.
Feral foray, where I can just fly around
and use your speed advantage
and basically run away from the brutes. That would be a very, very different game.
And no, he didn't even have the wizard for the teleport.
No,
so he was just foot slotting it. So tectonic interference is literally his favorite mission. It's rough.
And I was feeling kind of down, and as Josh was saying, I cried a little during lunch.
It's tough, man. I get it. Sounded like high hopes going into the event. Been killing it with NURGLE leading up to it. So that was a rough day one.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, after that, it can only get better.
Yep. Well, now all of you know that I actually won my next 4 games, but I'll kind of recap how I did it and how my game. And I do want to just touch on losing, even though that's my not expectation, my want, what I want from a tournament, what I strive for in a tournament is a 5-0. Losing's the best way that you grow, and especially with a newer army that you get those losses out of the way and you kind of pick up momentum and you become better as games goes on. And I wasn't as practiced with this army as I am with other armies, and so again, that's where the inexperience kind of let me down. And hopefully, as I keep playing the army, I'm able to
You said
decide when to go.
gotta stick to that one army, right?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
Also, it's like first time taking this army to a GT. To go 4-1 is like, how many GTs have I played with Deepkin? This was my first 5-0 with Deepkin. This is probably like my, over the past 3 years, like my 10th GT with Deepkin.
Yeah.
Or 8th or something. So it's 4-1 is a great start.
Yep.
Nothing to be ashamed of by any means. But had lunch, then round 2.
Yeah, so round 2, I was playing a beautiful Cities of Sigma army. So basically, the army was all Dark Elves. It was done by Hugo. He had quite a few Phoenix Guard, a 20 block of Phoenix Guard, a 10 block of Phoenix Guard. So Dark Shards, you love to see it. Fulminators, some K-Knight Shadow Stalkers, which I think were a good pickup for the teleporting capping. Anointed on Frostheart, Celestin Prime, and the Sorceress. Not in Living Cities though. He was running in Tempest Eye, so quite quick on the first turn, quite tanky on the first turn. They get +1 to their run, so much faster. Just looking at the list prior to the game, he was wanting to plant that Phoenix Guard unit on a central objective and then try to tank. So he basically was doing my game plan, but from a city's perspective, as opposed to a NURGLE perspective. And we're playing Survival of the Fittest, so 3 Predator units. And yeah, there wasn't really anything in his list aside from the Fulminators and maybe the Phoenix that he wanted to be a Predator. The Celestin Prime wasn't a candidate because it's off the table and you're unable to choose something that's off the table as your Predator.
Phoenix Guard aren't bad, like that big.
Aren't bad, but they're not necessarily killing the opponent's
No, you're right.
Predator unit. And so my instinct in this matchup is try to tie up those Fulminators. I charge them, don't let them charge me, because that -2 rend 3 damage will eat through flies. No matter how tanky you are, I think Fulminators are close to being the most damage output that you can have point for point in the game. And so I was really focused in on getting them locked down. And so like I said in my game 1, where it matched up the Plague Bears into the Fulminators, because I knew with the Fulminators 1-inch reach, once he eliminates the front line with Sloppy Bile Piper, I can no pile in and he's stuck forever. He's gonna just shoot them with a Fire Breath, but that's 2 or 3 mortals, and on a 20 block of Plague Bears, that's not gonna do very much. And so that was my game plan. And Carl was slightly still not feeling well from the festivities of the night, the night before, and the night before that, and the night before that. Forgot to summon Sloppity by Piper again.
Oh no!
But it all worked out for me because Hugo had rolled the charge for his Phoenix, and decided to re-roll it to get into my flies, and he had a 5-inch charge against the Fulminators, and he didn't get in with the Fulminators. So I was like, all right, I'm winning some luck.
Little bit of saving grace.
Yeah. I think it was a little bit of inexperience from Hugo. He's a little bit of a newer player, and so, you know, wanting this Phoenix to be in, the Phoenix wasn't going to do very much against the flies. He should have rerolled the charge or rolled the charge for the fulminators first. Saw, and then gone with the Phoenix. It's kind of just order of operations that caused that to happen. My balls is in the chat. I want to shout out my balls. He was there in spirit, but not in person, unfortunately.
Our buddy Mike had to vacate, unfortunately. Last minute drop. There's always next time.
Yeah, there is also next time. And so yeah, that was my game plan. He missed the charge on the fulminators, and I crunched in with the plague bears afterwards. Summoned Sloppity Bilepiper on the turn afterwards. Locked up the fulminators. Started to grind him down with disease and that sort of thing. And NURGLE just does that grinding playstyle better than any other army. He had the same game plan as me, but you know, unfortunately NURGLE is a little bit better. Chip damage from the disease. My Great Unclean One was sitting behind my plague bears, so everything within 7 was 3 up disease instead of 4 up disease. As well as the shooting attack from the Great Unclean One is actually the best part of the Great Unclean One, oddly enough. Obviously his monstrous action 2+4 mortal wounds is very, very good as well. But D6 attacks, 3s, 2s, -3/2 damage means you punch through any armor, and I was basically just getting lucky, hitting 5s and 6s on my number of attacks, hitting and wounding with almost everything, and hitting the Phoenix Guard. So the Phoenix Guard only had the 4+ ward to fight off the Great Unclean One. And basically turn after turn, you know, ended up grinding him out, and it was an 18-2 differential victory for me. So getting back on track with this, like I said, if he made that fulminator charge, the plague bears would be gone, and I would maybe be in trouble if he double turned me there. You know, but yeah, felt good after the City of Sigmar matchup.
Going back to level 1-1.
Yeah, 1-1. I was like, okay, let's do this. You know, I was like, kind of pissed off at myself for my performance round 1. I hold myself to a very high standard, and so I was like, let's win these next 4, and I will be happy at the end of the tournament. So, yeah.
All right, round 2 or round 3, sorry.
Round 3.
Last game of day 1.
Yeah, last day of game day 1. We were playing Feral Foray, so 6 objectives. 6 objectives isn't too bad for NURGLE. Kind of how I play it with the list that I have right now is I put the Plague Bears and the Guo in between 2 of the objectives on one end, then put almost all the flies on the 3rd objectives, and then I launch an attack straight through to the other side with those 10 flies. If my opponent has teleport, I'll leave 1 fly within 3 of the center so that they can't teleport right onto the point. And when they do teleport with something, then the 1 fly usually has quite a bit of damage. If it's not a dangerous model that my opponent is throwing into there, then the fly can usually deal with it. Whether it's like Tree Revenants or Shadow Stalkers or something, he can battle it out with them pretty good. And then the 9 other flies go straight up into the other point and try to cap that. So I was playing Cruel Boys, which is an army I know well. I know those of you who watch Season of War for the last 6 months or so have seen me jump from Cruel Boys Kragnose to NURGLE and are disappointed. So it's nice to see more Cruel Boys out in the wild. I would like to think it was partially because of myself just talking them up and having so much excitement for them. But I still think that they do have some play. It's just they have some really bad matchups. So my opponent was playing a Snatcher Boss, Gobsprak, which is not a thing that I see very often. 2 Swamp Collar Shamans, then this is where it gets kind of crazy. He has 20 Gut Rippas 10 Gut Rippas, 6 Manskewer Bolt Boys, 6 Manskewer Bolt Boys, and the 20 Hobgrot Slittus. And so now, you know, with the Super Sneaky, I knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to teleport those 20 block of Hobgrots right in front of me and use them as a screen so that if I take first, I contact the Hobgrot screen, and
Just start there.
then he comes with you know, everything, the Gut Rippas. He was smart enough to just put them just slightly out of his Gut Rippas so that he has an easy move and charge into me. I think he measured it to be like a 6-inch charge if I contacted all the Hobgrots. But you know, me being a 1-drop meant that I had choice, and so I did end up giving him first. And with Crew Boys, the most dangerous ranges is 15 for the double shot because they move 4, move 5.
I don't know, something like that.
Something like that. 15 inches. Their move plus the range of their double shot is 50. So I was 15 point. I was, you know, my pre-game move and all that, putting myself in a threatening position, was 15.1 away from my opponent. And I was like, well, shouldn't be too bad. 1 shot each would be 14 shots from the Bolt Boys because the leaders get 1 extra, so 7 from 1 unit and then 7 from the other unit. I was like, that averages out to a third of 14 is what, 4, so 8 mortal wounds. If you account for the 6s, it'll be 10 mortal wounds. And so what ended up happening was something crazy. He ended up shooting both units into my 4-man fly unit, and he ended up doing 28 mortal wounds on 14 shots. 5s and 6s, 28 mortal wounds.
It's not bad. Pretty good.
I like looked at him and he's like, oh ho ho, Bolt Boys do it again. I was like, oh my god, maybe it was a mistake giving him first. Having done 28 mortal wounds, I'm like, if this output keeps up, like, I will not have an army by turn 2.
Yeah.
You know, saving grace, I have 5 up ward, so I think I saved 8 or 9 of them, so it ended up being only 19 wounds, I believe. So it took out 2 flies and damaged 1, which I knew was gonna heal. So that was kind of nice. He was within 14 of the Grit and Clean 1, so he heals the 3 instead of 1. And so yeah, you know, as he correctly did, I charged the Hobgrot screen, but just with 2 flies, thinking that I was going to eliminate them, and I ended up eliminating them. I played that way because I knew those 2 flies had a very good chance of killing the 20 Hobgrots, especially because my general was within 7, so they didn't have immunity to Battle Shock. And I didn't want to commit too much because those Gut Rippas, you know, you don't see them very often, but when they have a Snatcher boss behind them, they
are scary.
Still. Yeah, especially amped up with the potion and the extra wound on the 6s. And so I still measured it so that it would still be a 9-10 inch charge for him, you know, to do that to the rest of my army. If I lost 2 flies, the counter charge from me would be quite, you know, harmful. And my Plague Bears and my Guo started to come up onto the other side. And so we went back and forth. Gut Rippers got into me, but you know, that pretty darn sloppity Bile Piper no pile-in shenanigans meant that I locked up his 10 Gut Rippers.
You summoned him this time.
I did summon him this time. And I kept auto running 6 my Grit and Clean 1 to just get him in a threatening position as well. And he basically had to castle up just to protect his points. He didn't have any teleports or any tricksy movement. I mean, Gobsprak with double move from Sneaky Miasma is very scary to come onto my point. And I was aware of that, so every single time he would try to bait out dispels from me, I just waited for Sneaky Miasma because I knew that was the only way that he could do it to um, to take any of my points because I was playing kind of mid board and then starting to threaten from like a central castle towards his objectives. And I was lucky enough to unbind those spells. Um, Now Gobsprak, while he knows all the spells for crew boys and he's this like amazing dispeller and that sort of thing, he doesn't have any bonuses to cast, and so he's just naked casting these spells, and these spells are usually 7 or 8. And when he doesn't cast them, or if he does cast them, I still have an unbind, and so it ended up being only round 4 that he got the spell off, launched Gobsprak over. But now the problem with Gobsprak is he's only a 5-up save, and so you have to play him pretty conservatively.
Yeah, cagey.
Yeah, cagey. And so he put him kind of off to the side, touching an objective, taking it from me. But he couldn't put him within 1 to burn my objective. And the reason for that is I would collapse on him. I was starting to run out of battle tactics at that point, but it would just give me an easy bring it down, killing a monster, doing the battle tactic, that is a 3-point swing. So he played him conservatively. And now I was threatening his point, but then he had reinforced it with a 20 gut rippers. And I just said, forget it. I'm not gonna go into you. I'm just gonna come backwards and kill Gobsprak instead, which I ended up doing. And my immobile castle of 20 plague bearers and the Guo was now this kind of aggressive force that's going. My flies are now defending my points, and I just kind of switched over. And so I kind of just rotated the board and attacked, and I was able to burn some of his points. I was able to kind of the most, trying to recap games when it's kind of past. During my first turn, I had run a unit of 2 flies like as far deep into his zone as possible. He had thought I was going to try to charge them and trying to make a 10-inch charge into Bolt Boys, but I knew that that's not very logical or not very likely. So I just ran them to within 5 of the Bolt Boys, got the double turn, and I was able to crunch into those Bolt Boys. And so when he only had 1 unit of Bolt Boys to impact me, I wasn't that worried. And again, I was just measuring constantly the 15 so that he didn't have double shoot against me. He would have the single shot. And I was playing averages more so. If he did spike at any time, that could potentially be a very bad sign for me. But he rolled average after the 28 mortal wound spike he had turn 1. And so after eliminating Gobsprak, I think I was pretty much in the clear, and I played a more cagey game. The Great and Clean one started sweeping all the way across his side onto the 1 castle he had that was off to the corner. And so I ended up taking it. It was a fairly close game. I believe it's 15-5, so not wholly crazy. Correct. So every 2, I believe, is 1 point from 10 to all the way to all the way to, if you had the differential of 19 plus in victory points, that would be a 20-0.
Yeah.
So 15-5 is relatively close in the grand scheme of things. I couldn't, because of the output he had turn 1, I couldn't commit everything into him and smash him like I wanted to. But that's how it goes sometimes. The dice
you gotta, like, that's, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but that's part of the downside of the differential system, at least in terms of differential first, which is what it was at this event, not wins first. Because you're playing to win. You're not playing like to run up the score.
I could have took some risks and maybe ran up the score, but I played a more like a more measured game to win first.
And we'll get into it later more, but that should be the incentive. That should be incentivized first over just trying to smash and run up the score.
I mean, he had a lovely army as well. His crew boys were fire themed instead of swamp themed, which is not something that I've seen before. So that was incredibly nice to play. And Yeah, he played a very good game. Again, the problem with his army is he doesn't have the speed, especially with Gut Rippas and Bolt Boys. Bolt Boys, move whatever 5 and then shoot, 15, and then as opposed to having more fast. They don't have access to fast units that are able to just get into your opponent. Like even flies like Fusco Blightlords, which aren't the fastest unit at 8-inch move, you could still threaten your opponent over 2 or 3 turns.
Yeah.
Patrick East, previous champion of Grand Clash in the chat. And so, yeah, I had the mobility advantage, and Age of Sigmar now in 3.0 is all about mobility, movement, and capping points.
So like movement is one of the most important parts of the game, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You're in the right spots at the right times. That's really good. Prize.
Yeah. Or you can get there. Like
yeah.
easily get there. Some armies have teleports, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't threatened. I could leave my home objectives pretty comfortably because I knew he had one trick to do it, and I was aware of what that one trick was, which is the sneaky miasma, Gobsprak, and then move. But with that being said, it's still a move. It's not even a teleport, so you could potentially screen it out. His base is pretty big at 130, and so if you cloud an objective with bodies and stuff, he still can't land on it. And he's only 5 models, and like we said, not the most tanky, and doesn't hit that hard. So there it is. My day 1 ended 2-1.
Yep.
Again,
Super solid.
The Iron Jaws matchup disappointed me greatly, but I took some lessons from it. Summoned Sloppity, didn't do it game 2, but he did it game 3.
That's all you can do. Is like that's how you learn. That's the best way to learn, right? It's just getting more and more reps, going up into different matchups, different things.
And that was the first time I played Iron Jaws with NURGLE, and they have insane output.
I think if it was a traditional list, you would have been in a lot better position. But the fact that it was, instead of the page, it was
20 brutes.
20 brutes. Yeah, that's real bad.
Yeah. So yeah, there we are. Round 1, or day 1.
Nice.
2-1. So pretty good. The rest of you were 3-0. So I was like, I hate you guys. I love you guys at the same time. So going into day 2. And so we knew our pairings
the night before.
Now I didn't know my pairing the night before because I was playing the fill-in. He wasn't a ringer, actually. They were actually counting his points, and he was actually playing through the tournament after my balls had to drop. So it said that I was playing Mike Simeon, and we're like, that's not possible. He's currently physically here. But he was 1 and 2. So I was, because of the differential, I was the lowest of the 2 1s going into day 2. And so I had the pleasure of playing Martin, who was a Soul Blight Gravelords player. He was we don't have his list because it's not on BCP.
Yep.
He was playing 80 zombies, a vampire lord, and basic 10 direwolves, and then Terrorgeist, like unmounted Terrorgeist, just the monster itself, which is not something you see very often. No. Manfred, which you do see very often, and the vampire lord on zombie dragon. So he had those three monsters in his list, which kind of do the heavy lifting in the combat side of things. Then he has the 80 zombies and 20 dire wolves to play the objective screen for his big things. And once you eliminate that screen, he comes in with the big things and has the potential of summoning his zombies or his dire wolves onto different areas of the board. So I was, having played Lavon a few times with Soulblight Gravelords, I was kind of aware of the tricks of the thing, not leaving my objectives unguarded just because he couldn't get to them foot-wise. He'll throw his 20 zombies into something, get them killed, and try to revive them onto the other
10 back, exactly.
Yeah, onto the other side of the board. No Gorslav. And so yeah, I was aware of these tricks, and we played. It's not
Tooth and nail.
Tooth and nail, so there was no deep strike. So that was in my advantage as well, because I almost never deep strike the Lord of Affliction with the Poscoils. They're usually just faster walking up the board, flying up the board. And so he couldn't bring his zombies up from the ground and pin me in my deployment zone. So I was happy and comfortable giving him first turn. And so because of how fast the zombies go, you can tell, how fast they're gonna go. They're gonna auto run 6, they're gonna move 4, and then they're gonna pile on 6. So if you're outside of that 16-inch range, then you're pretty happy. Now I was concerned that the zombie dragon, the Terrorgeist, and Manfred were all very, very fast models, 14-inch, 16-inch models. Plus with amethystine pinions, they can get up to 19, can smash into me. But he was also worried that I was just going to pregame move into him and just pin him behind his zombie screens, because he put the zombies in front first. And so he put his stuff further back. And so I gave him turn. He wasn't able to do much. I was on the points, both points actually in the middle. And I just told him to come at me. What are you going to do? I knew zombies didn't have the output to kill the Blight Lords, and the Blight Lords do have the output to kill the zombies. Each of them have 11 attacks. Zombies don't have a save, so the no red and fly attacks are very good as well. And at the end of the combat phase, they roll a die and they do mortals as well against things that have low wound counts. And so I was very comfortable. We we kind of traded the objectives back and forth. He would throw as many zombies on the objective, I would clear them, and then he would throw more zombies on the objective, then I would clear them. Then he would throw wolves onto the objectives, then I would clear them. So that was kind of the cadence of the game, where he would take it because he had more bodies. The Poscoils, while good, only count for 2 each. And so if you're
take it back, but they're not.
You can take it back. Correct. I did not learn "come at me" in French. I did not. The only French I learned all weekend was "c'est bon," and that wasn't even from a French person. That was from Bridge, just yelling it out over and over. Yeah. The one moment in the game that really made me nervous was his zombie dragon. I thought was gonna go on to the point trying to fight Poscoils, so I was ready for that. The Lord of Affliction was sitting behind them. I was gonna all-out defense, and I was gonna say you can't all-out attack, which means that your math is off. And against 4 flies, I don't believe a zombie dragon can kill him in any shape or form. Well, he ended up charging my Great Unclean one, and I was like, okay, 18 wounds and a 4 up, 5 up. He'll survive against a zombie dragon. No, he did not survive against a zombie dragon. He just died. He just blew off the table. Yeah, and I was like, oh no. Now he did have D3 extra attacks on the lance when he charges. Got the 3. And so he was, I think, 6 attacks, 4 damage each, and all that stuff. And I was like, uh-oh. Now the Great and Clean One's dead. And I'm at 1,500 points versus most of his army still. Or the zombies had died, but they're like 110 points each. I was like, oh. He's
not easy to kill.
No, he's not easy to kill. Well, he actually is pretty easy to kill when you actually dedicate some stuff into him. Yeah, he dies pretty easy. But because he did that, he did fail his battle tactic, because Manfred had the unenviable task of trying to kill 4 flies. And he was never going to do that.
Yeah.
If you had both of them in, then possibly he could do that. Because he was running out of battle tactics at that point to do, because I was holding the 2 central objectives so tightly, especially the one that had my 20 plague bears and 4 flies, and I kept flying. I flew the flies way off to the left, and so the zombies couldn't charge them without being out of position. And those 2 flies basically, if I was to auto run them, 6 could get onto the point. So he had a block of 20 zombies that basically had to sit in his home point for the whole game, and so I was feeling very good that he only had 60 zombies to operate in the 20 direwolves. But after the Garen Clean one blew up, I'm like, what am I gonna do? Now here's where Carl's misplays turned into good plays. Carl forgot to use his summoning points again to summon Sloppy Biopiper the whole game. And by round 4, I had 35 summoning points, which meant I summoned another Great and Clean one on turn 4. And so he lived, and was it actually pretty pretty consequential in the game in that he got me a Battle Tactics, the one in NURGLE where you can summon a Great and Clean one and contest an objective that's not in your zone, which was easy enough because Great and Clean one, because I forgot to summon stuff during the game. So there it is. Ended up taking it. It was still fairly close. I believe it was 13-7, so even closer than my Cool Boys game or my Cities of Sigmar game. Soul Blight is an incredibly hard army to just roll over, especially when you don't have shooting to kill the heroes. They are so reliant on the heroes, and because they have so many bodies, you have to go through those first before you get to the heroes.
And like NURGLE, they're happy to like get started in combat with those units.
Yeah, it just grind. Yeah. So again, 13-7. My game plan was just to grind him, get on the objectives early, prevent his monsters from killing any of the big threats in my army. But I kind of failed in that game plan because I baited him with one thing, didn't take the bait, and killed my Great and Clean one instead. But yeah, there's a few moments in the game where he failed Battle Tactics by a couple wounds, 3 or 4 wounds here, 3 or 4 wounds there. Relying on Terrorgeist 6 to bite to do 6 mortal wounds is not really the most optimal game plan, but because of where I was putting him on the board in terms of objective play, he only had to kill Battle Tactics to do, because he didn't know if he could take the objectives from me, especially with aggressive expansion holding 2. Conquer was difficult, wasn't guaranteed, so he was just trying to do as much as possible to just score Battle Tactics, and he failed a few of those, which were actually the deciding factor in the game.
Yes. It's big, those Battle Tactics.
Yep. And so 13-7, like we said before in the differential, meant that I only won by 6 points or so, and that was kind of the 1-2 more on round 5, and I think 1 or 2 Battle Tactics over the course of the game. Yeah. So 3-1 going into it, and I knew around 5 I was probably going to face somebody who either like me, lost one of the early games and won next few, or it could possibly been somebody who has won quite a few games, like 1, 2, and 3, and then lost the 4th game. So it was going to be a much tougher matchup, and I think he is actually in the chat. I want to say your name properly because I had an amazing game against Jean-Nicolas Richard. Pretty sure I messed that up. But Jean was playing Maggotkin of NURGLE. Now he is playing a Glotkin list with Festus, the Leech Lord, a Lord of Afflictions with Overwhelming Stetch, so quite similar to mine. And then just, I believe it was 2/2/2 Pascoa Blight Lords, and then 5 Blight Kings. So core of the list, of course, were the Blight Kings. The Glotkin, for those of you that don't know, has a command ability that says that he can charge at the end of your movement phase, so it doesn't even allow you to charge them, which is bad for me because I want to do the mortals on the charge to kind of supplement my damage. But because he has Blight Lords, he would be the one charging me and doing the mortals.
Yeah.
And so I had to be very careful in where I placed models, which also meant my strategy of using the Plague Bears wouldn't work because I would lock him up. I would remove the front line of the Plague Bears. He would retreat on his turn, and on my turn, he'll charge me.
Yeah.
So I couldn't possibly lock him up with the Plague Bears as well. And, Festus pointing at a unit and saying -1 to save is really bad in a grinding game. And the Glockin is just a slightly better version of the Great and Clean one. He has -2 rend. He has a very reliable shooting attack, and he's 20 wounds instead of 18 from the Great and Clean one. So he's slightly better. And his Stomp, quote unquote, does 5 mortal wounds instead of the 4 from the Great and Clean one. So he's slightly better. But the thing about him as well is he is only a 4-inch move.
Yeah.
Same as the Great and Clean one.
Do you want to jump in? Sorry to interrupt. Well, a quick thank you to Josh Aikens for the super chat.
No. No, we don't want to thank Josh Aikens.
We're thanking Josh. Doesn't want us to let people know that Sentinels are good, but that's probably not much of a surprise to anyone.
There's a lot of people down on the Sentinels with
they have their strengths and their weaknesses for sure, like anything. Yeah. Only half the damage of Wardens, but the 30-inch range is pretty good too.
Yeah. It's always the delivery system, right? When I look, the reason why the Puskals are so good is because they are delivered much, much quicker than the Blight Kings or the Plague Bears or the Great and Clean one or the Glockin. But he had a very interesting game plan where he would just sit sort of kind of outside my movement range, and so he would control my movement with the threat of charging me on my turn, and I didn't want that because Arliss was fairly similar in its elements, and if the only thing the thing that would bring it over my list would be the mortal wounds from the charging. We were playing Savage Gains, so 2 objectives in the middle, 2 objectives in your home. The middle ones are worth 2, your own is worth 1, and your opponent's worth 4. Again, kind of like a broken record here. I put the Plague Bears and the Great and Clean one together, and then the Flies together, and I was gonna sweep on one flank with the Flies and try to hold one flank with the Plague Bears and the Great and Clean one. He did similar. He put the Blight Kings, which are fairly slow, with Festus, and I think 1 unit of Flies on one flank, and then he put Glotkin and the rest of his Flies looking at my Flies. Now, I had thought that this was a mistake from Jean. I'm like, if you're gonna meet 4 Flies and Glotkin versus 8 Flies, I think the 8 Flies are able to take it in the end. But boy, was I wrong. He ended up charging me, and because he dictated the charge, I had the 4-man Fly unit there. They have such a huge footprint. He was able to tag only the corner of the 4 Fly unit with the 2 Flies, and basically was able to nullify my numbers advantage on the Flies with the 2 Flies. The Glockin got into the other the 2 Fly units, and he was able to, over the course of turns, remove those Fly units. Now, it kept going like he had 5 models under the point. I would put 6. He would put 7. I would kill 1. It would go back to 5. And then we kept just fighting very small amounts of model, like 1 or 2 models here and there on the middle left objective. The middle right objective, his Blight Kings got into my Plague Bears, his unit of Flies got into my Plague Bears, and his Lord of Afflictions got into my Plague Bears. But because of how he positioned it, I was able to summon Sloppity and say no pile-in. And because of how the turn order went, he wasn't able to retreat his Flies, his Blight Kings, and his Lord of Afflictions immediately to countercharge me again. And so it basically locked him down for 3 turns on that point. Now, I wasn't scoring it, but it meant that he wasn't threatening my point immediately. And because I saw that opportunity, I doubled him, I think, from 1 to 2, or from 2 to 3. I launched my Great and Clean one straight forward towards his point, and my 1 single Fly forward onto his point, and I was able to cap it, I think, on turn 3. So those 4 points are massive in kind of a close game like this where we're grinding out. Now he was able to unlock himself later on with the plague bears and was able to threaten my point. So I had to backtrack with a Guo. And there was a moment in the game where I had to kill 3 Nurglings because, of course, I would do this against my opponent. So I was well aware of it, but because I was thinking so hard of my game plan, I wasn't thinking of what he was gonna do. He just retreated his Lord of Afflictions, and I'm like, oh, if you retreat 8 inches, you're not gonna get my point. But what does Nurgle have? Summoning!
Yeah.
So he retreated and summoned 3 Nurglings, taking my point a round earlier than what I had envisioned that he was going to do, which put me really on the back foot. And I was like, okay, the Great and Clean One's going to go in there, clear the 4 Nurglings, I'll take it back. Now he has to kill the Great and Clean One to take the point back for me. The Great and Clean One does not kill 4 Nurglings, 3 Nurglings apparently. And I was like, uh-oh. So I'm holding his point, he's holding my point. We're trading on the left-hand side. By that point, the right middle objective had been burned. And so basically, because we had traded home objectives, the left point was the main contesting point and was probably what was going to win the game. At that point, I actually had grinded out the Glotkin and his flies on that point, and I only had my Lord of Affliction and 1 fly on that point. And he basically had a big decision round 4, is to bring his fly units upwards and try to take his own home point back, because at this point I believe I was up by 1 battle tactic, and if he allowed me to score those 4 points again, that would just close out the game for me in a very, very close game. And he was able to do that. He was able to clear off the 1 fly that's way off on his home point, but it also meant that he was relying on the rest of the flies. I believe there's only 2 and the 3 Nurglings to survive against the Great and Clean One. Now he came back and ended up doing some work. I was able to do battle tactics with monster points on top, and
Always big.
as well, the biggest thing was having the Great and Clean One alive on turn 5. I didn't have any more battle tactics left, except for Monsters Take Over.
Oh, nice.
And so I just Monsters Take Over. And when we were calculating the points, I beat Jean by 2 points. So it was an incredibly close game. We went almost to time. We played all 5 rounds.
Yeah.
Fought
Sounds like a slog.
Tooth and nail. It was like disease, ward, disease, ward, disease, ward, disease, ward.
Yeah.
It was so much rolling, incredibly close game. There's a few decision points, a few ward rolls that could have swung the game either my way or his way. I think the advantage of my list was I had more units to throw around and threaten his home point, but because he had less units, he had to commit hard on 1 and try to, you know, smash that point and then go into the next point, smash that point, then go into the next point, as opposed to my game where I was like, this is not going well, I'm gonna retreat and then I'm gonna go to the next point and then still have some things on this point to contest and make it hard so you couldn't leave. And so it was kind of a numbers game from that perspective. But I love the Glotkin.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't rate him. I know Warfire Minis, we've been talking on the Discord about the Glotkin and kind of his place in the competitive meta, but he definitely has a place. The 4-up save is what lets him down. Even with 20 wounds and a 5-up save, 5-up ward after that, he goes down pretty quickly to shooting. But when you have combat armies or armies that, you know, don't want to engage with you and just sit and cap objectives, because you can countercharge them, they have to be very aware. And I felt very exhausted trying to just
be aware of that at every point of the game.
Every single move that I move, I have to make sure that, okay, is this an easy charge for him? Can he pile in afterwards to get into my point? Oh, okay. I move this unit. Oh, okay. I have to be careful. What can charge me if I'm here? What can charge me if I'm here? Like, constantly just grinding your opponent's mental resources down.
It's like the Iron Suns game. You forget it for one moment, it's gonna cripple you.
Yep.
Has the potential to.
Yeah, and the difference between the two is the Blightcraig ability from Nurgle is at the end of your opponent's movement phase. So your opponent doesn't have the opportunity to charge you, which
Yeah.
in some instances is better, but in some instances is worse. Because in Iron Suns, because you wait for your opponent to charge you, that means they're closer for you to charge with your under units. But though you don't necessarily pick the engagements, they can potentially charge so that they're covered
Your
by
stuff's already
another
tagged
unit.
or
Correct. As opposed to this one, which you have to make longer charges, but you dictate every single engagement that happens in the game.
and it prevents stuff like impact hits,
Yeah.
Buffs of being on the charge for like fulminators.
Yeah. Or a lot of cavalry units that require to charge to do things. You can just shut that off fairly easily. And it does mean that the Glotkin is much faster than people give him credit for, because you usually just auto run him 6 turn 1. He's 10 inches up the board. Now he projects a bubble of just charging around him. If your opponent does charge him, he moves up again, and now he projects that bubble again, and each of your units project this bubble where they affect the game much more than individual units that aren't going to be affected by this command ability. So I really like Jean's list, and he played it very well, but I was just luckier that day and at certain points, and so I took it by 2 points, and so I ended up my tournament in 4-1. So I was very happy.
Yeah,
now,
awesome.
The thing about the tournament that was for myself not something that I agree with. It was differential first, and then it was, I believe, strength of schedule afterwards. I think that was how it was. That it was delineated, or that's how it was decided. So at a 4-1, I believe there was only about 24 people who are 5-0 or 4-1 or very close to that. And so my 4-1, because I had incredibly close games, Jean and I, and
yeah, it's probably an 11-1, 11-9.
11-9, yeah, and the Cruel Boys player and myself as well. And even Martin with his Soul Blight Gravelords, because I couldn't just push through his army in 1 or 2 turns and score all the points, meant that most of my games, the highest I had was 18-2, 15, 13, and 11 were all my wins. And then my loss was massive at 0-20. Meant that I did end up I did end up at 39th out of 120, which is still a very respectable finish for myself. But I did count later on. I think I would have been 20th or 21st if it was just pure win-loss first and the differential after, which is 18 points. There was people who were 3-2 that placed above me. Quite a few of them actually placed above me, because they smashed their wins and their losses were much closer than my loss. So it did feel like it penalized having closer games. It also meant that I'm not accusing anyone of doing this, but it opens the door or incentivizes this sort of play, that if you're losing to your opponent, to slow down your play so you don't play all 5 rounds.
So the score doesn't get run up more.
Yeah, or you don't talk out the 5th round. You just say, nope, dice down. I'm not gonna play my 5th round. I'm not gonna play 4th round, because that sort of thing. Because once you're tabled, of course they're gonna rack up more points and you're gonna lose by more. So it incentivizes that sort of behavior as well. But overall, I was very happy with the tournament. Everyone was lovely. All the after hours activities, what we got into at the Devil's Hole.
The reason I don't have a voice today still.
Yeah, just screaming, singing "Oh Canada" loudly in the French bar for no reason. All those moments I'll take with me moving forward. So, I had fun. the scoring system was my only criticism of the tournament, or something that I would love for them to improve on. Now, with that being said, differential in of itself is not the problem. I think not accounting wins first is the issue. And then if you had differential as your secondary, because they're in a 120 person tournament, there's going to be quite a few people who are on the same win-loss bracket. And so if you want to delineate all those people, I think I'm using that word wrong, but whatever, I'm going to keep using it. If you want to differentiate those people based on the differential, then that's totally fine. That's no problem.
That or battle tactics or victory points, strategy, whatever you want to do, that's fine. But it's always got to be wins first.
And so 39th 4-1, I was fairly happy now to like take that success and those lessons against Iron Jaws into my next tournaments, and try to have measured aggression is kind of how I like to describe my game plan with NURGLE.
I think 4-1, it's like you said, 4-1's obviously the thing to focus on. You can't do anything about the matchups you get and the games you play. All you're trying to do is win, and you did that super well. I think the French community, it sounded like, is more used to that kind of scoring system out in Quebec, but for us that coming from Ontario or our friends up from the States,
the US,
whenever we go to events around there, it's like we don't play like that anywhere else.
It's unique to that area, definitely. And I do want to say that the caliber of player from 120th to like 1 is incredible. Like, even though I lost my first game, and some people would say, oh, Carl had an easier road up, every single one of those players were accomplished players that knew the game well, and welcoming as well, because I don't speak French at all. I don't understand French at all, and each of my opponents were gracious enough to play the game in my native language and not their native language. Some of them aren't confident in their English abilities, but they were still open enough to play in a language that's not their native language, or their first language. So it was incredible for to see that. And even like all those players, again, like I said, even though I lost my first game, were tough opponents from 2 to 5, 1 to 5. Were incredibly difficult to play, and knew their stuff.
And try to say, like we said it last year, if you saw our recap of Grand Clash last year, like amazing community out there, skill wise, like you're saying, but awesome people, super welcoming,
and the hobby too.
Hobby level is insane.
If you want to see some nicely, like not just 1 or 2 nicely painted armies that who's gonna win best painted, like just incredible from top to bottom. Like when you have people like Dayton Obrey and his Daughters of Cain, which is like a beautifully painted army, like not be near the top of the painting standard of stuff, or even Joe's crazy display board, if you saw it, was like in the mix for like against like 20 other people, in terms of like so many craziness, conversions, that sort of thing. That tournament Grand Clash just mixes sports. People were giving me gifts. Weirdly enough, I have like a weird terrain piece now. Lionel got a box with chocolate that had like dwarven runes on them, like gold coins. Like it was like, it's very, very amazing to like just to be part of like a community that's so passionate about AOS, and that's so like different than like all the other areas we play. Like playing in Ontario is kind of similar to playing in the US. It's like we have very
similar experience,
philosophy, similar experiences, but when you go to Clash, it's different. It feels like a totally different environment. Like you've flown miles and miles away to play in a GT. That's what it feels like, even though it's so local, it's so close. So I really enjoy that aspect as well. And I always do the worst at Clash. Last year I didn't do particularly well, but I think during our conversation, I think I nailed down what was the key ingredient to me not performing as well as I usually do? Can you guess, Jordan?
You gotta tell me.
Cheese. There's
Oh,
so
God.
much cheese in Quebec. So much cheese. Putain, you know, I had a pizza that was amazing. I had cheesy bread. Joe brought meats. Joe's Meats. Shout out to Joe's Meats, our new sponsor. He brought like a charcuterie board. It was just so much cheese that I basically.
You are lactose intolerant.
I am lactose intolerant, and I tell everybody that I'm lactose intolerant, and I tell everyone I can't have cheese.
But then you
when
eat
you're
it
in a
anyways.
but when you're in a place like that, you gotta just you gotta just eat the cheese. Yes, Julian, I said putain. I'm pretty sure I'm saying it wrong.
Putin.
But putain, whatever. I've worked 12 hours. I
All
don't
good.
have any more energy in my body. But I wanted to recap my experiences at such a great tournament.
For sure.
And such a great environment to play.
For sure. And I think with that, we'd wrap things up by saying a big shout out to Alex and all the organizers. There's more than just Alex, but Alex is the one who wrangles all the chats. But so many people that helped, so many people that made it an amazing experience for us. And yeah, I'm excited. Like we talked about, Carl, there was so much going on in the evenings and whatnot with dinner. This is the first I'm hearing of like all your games in depth. So
yeah. So yeah, a lot of the people that we met along the way are in chat, and so I want to just give them a shout out. Julian, Patrick, my boss again. I saw Jean in there as well. Like before, Pierre-Luc, always my buddy.
Oh yeah.
So basically all those great people that we met. There's dozens more that we met that I can't all shout out all you guys all at the same time, but I just want to say heartfelt thank you to you guys for making it such a great experience, making it a welcoming experience, and a very competitive experience as well. So I would love to see you guys return the favor and come down to Season of War GT, because there are tons of prizes. And we had a Ontarian win your tournament, so we kind of want one of you guys to try to win one of our tournaments.
Well, Earl's throwing down the gauntlet for us, but do want to, as you mentioned, we do have Season of War GT coming up in August. Our first time ever running this event, so the first year we're doing it, so we're super excited for it. Already, I literally have the printers in the background right now. You can see printing away on tons more terrain for tables. So we're pumped to make some beautiful battlefields for everyone to come. But Season of War GT is August 6th and 7th. If you want to learn more, you can find it on Facebook event, or I post it on Twitter, or just comment somewhere and we'll give you a link. But yeah, Mississauga right near the airport. Love to have anyone interested. So hope to make it a great time for anyone coming in as well. But otherwise, just want to say a big thank you to everyone who did join us in chat tonight. Watches any of our content back after it's live or whatnot. Really means a ton. And the biggest thank you to our premium members who are the backbone of the channel, make all this content and the time that goes into everything. From graphics, all this stuff, figuring it all out. It is only because of our premium members that allow us to do it. So thank you guys so much. And we'll see you soon in another battle report.
Bye.
Bye.